Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all having a great day. Happy Halloween and welcome to my favorite holiday of the year. Halloween has always been one of my absolute favorites, and with that I really wanted to make a video that encapsulates my love for Halloween and share it with you guys. I was really racking my brain on what to come up with, and rather than rehashing classics that everybody knows like Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Dracula, like those really fantastic horror classics, I think I'd like to share with you what I consider to be the modern day horror classics of our generation. Now, I know that's a tall ask, there's a lot of opinions kind of swirling still within the horror community, but I think I have some ones that are definitely considered classics by today's standards. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So starting off with my first bona fide classic of the modern horror generation, we've got to talk about Trick or Treat. Trick or Treat came out in 2007, and if you've seen this face before, you probably recognize it because you've seen it at your Spirit Halloween. It is, of course, Sam, the mascot of this movie, and it is so much fun. This movie does a great job of walking the line between comedy and horror, which I think honestly some of the best horror movies do. What this movie does so well is it's an anthology movie, so it brings together multiple different horror scenarios for characters in the movie to kind of interact with and overcome, and it does such a great job of feeling festive and feeling like you're in the middle of a Halloween night and watching these different stories interact with each character and each scenario that you get to watch. I think the reason this movie has stood the test of time in the last 15 years and really grown an appreciation from fans is because it is honestly one of the most quintessential Halloween movies ever made. I mean, of course, the argument could be made that Halloween could be considered one of the most quintessential Halloween movies, and while I would argue that's true, I would also argue a really strong case for this because you've got your classics like Trick or Treating, ghosts, werewolves, killers, everything you would expect for a horror movie to provide. It does so masterfully in just 5 vignettes of different stories and anthology, and I think that's one of the reasons it's looked upon so fondly is because it manages to make everything feel so visceral and so fun and know what it is and have fun with that concept. And honestly, I think that's one of the things that Trick or Treat does so well is it just plays to its strengths. It knows what it is. It knows it's an anthology with some comedy elements, and it does such a good job of taking those original urban legends and Halloween stories that we've grown up knowing and implementing them into this movie that is just so much fun to watch. It's a fantastic and fun watch, and honestly, I think it's one of the best ways to start your Halloween night. Up next on this list is one of my personal favorite movies in the horror genre, and that, of course, is the titular It Follows. Now, It Follows is one of the most unique and creative horror movies I've ever seen, full stop. I love this movie. The premise, of course, does a great job of playing off of typical tropes in the horror genre, such as the idea that teenagers have sex, and then, of course, they're the ones that die. But what's cool is that is the plot. The plot is this curse, this thing, this entity that follows the main characters. It is only passed on by sex, and that is the premise. The premise is the teenagers fall into the classic horror trope, and thus they are plunged into running away from this entity, and I absolutely love that concept. It keeps every scene tense because everybody around her could possibly be the entity chasing her, and it creates this fantastic cat and mouse game of who do we trust, who do we look for in a crowd. Is that person following me? I don't know. It's such a great masterclass intense horror, and it's one of the best examples of how to properly scare an audience. I just absolutely love what this movie does. Furthermore, I think this movie has one of the best aesthetics and vibes to it that I've really seen in a horror movie. There's nothing quite like it, and it does an amazing job of making you unsure not only about what time period it's set in, but if it even has a time period. It sort of feels like a little pocket of reality separate from our own that kind of just exists in this world. And honestly, it's kind of a shame we've never seen another movie from it. I would love a sequel to this because it is just that good. Also, absolutely have to talk about the soundtrack. The soundtrack in this movie is one of my absolute favorite horror soundtracks and one of my favorite movie soundtracks in general. This thing has an excellent score and it is just incredible. I honestly urge you to just listen to the title song for this movie and it'll hook you right there. It's by Disaster Pieces. They do an incredible job. Obviously, it's a massive recommendation, being one of my favorites, but I honestly think it's a fantastic movie in its own right, and I think you're going to have an excellent time with it. Moving on to our next film, that is going to be Train to Busan. Train to Busan is a South Korean film that came out in 2016, and it is a zombie film. Now, I know what you're thinking, zombie film, we've seen it all, there's no possible way this could be an interesting movie. Well, it just so happens Train to Busan is an incredible movie. It is something that takes the zombie genre and really switches up the formula enough to make it feel fresh. And honestly, I thought the characters and the morality story within Train to Busan was one of its strengths. That's one of those things that you don't really expect in a zombie movie. When you're watching a zombie film, typically you are there for the gore, you're there for the kills, you're there for the social commentary. You're not normally there for the story or the characters, but this movie does a great job of pulling on the heartstrings of the main characters and making the audience really feel for them. And it really feels like this great social commentary, as most zombie movies do. It has this phenomenal idea of classism and where we rank on the social ladder and how that affects how we act as people when situations are tough. And honestly, Train to Busan is one of the best examples of that. In fact, I think it goes even beyond just horror. I think it's a perfect example of what happens when you take a social element and inject it into a movie that has a totally different situation. It's just really, really well done. I think it's one of the more thought-provoking horror movies on this list, especially considering that there's so much social commentary you can pull from it, but it certainly does not lack in the zombie department, the gore department. I mean, these are crazy zombies. These are some of my favorite types because I love it when zombies are a little bit different than the norm. You don't have the Walking Dead style where they just shamble. These are fast. These are swarming. These are vicious. And I think the movie does an excellent job of really portraying that. All in all, even if you're not a big zombie fan, I still think Train to Busan is worth a watch just for the story, the characters, and the social commentary alone. I think it leaves a great message. It really kind of ends in a sort of optimistic way, and it's really just a wonderful story. I highly recommend Train to Busan. Those of you who have seen my previous videos or know me, you know this movie was coming. Terrifier 2 is a bona fide classic. I don't think there's any sort of question at this point whether or not Terrifier deserves to be a modern horror classic, but Art the Clown is amazing. He is just everything we want in a modern slasher, and honestly, since the days of Freddy and Jason, I don't think I've seen a more iconic killer in any horror movie since. Now, obviously, you could say that, oh, well, Sam, from Trick or Treat, yes, Sam is an icon, no question. But Art deserves to be just as much as an icon as he does. And honestly, at this point, what is there to say? This is an incredible amalgamation of grindhouse cinema with horror elements, and it is just mended beautifully. I think Damien Leone did an amazing job, and if you've seen my Terrifier 2 review, you know I love this movie. I think it is an incredible achievement, and the fact that it was made on a budget of $400,000 is insane to me. Not only that, but the soundtrack, the kills, the actors, even like in Terrifier 2, the actors and the story is a lot of fun. I think it's safe to say that it leaves a lot of questions unanswered, but I definitely think that this movie is a step above the first by far, and I think it cements Art the Clown's spot as a horror icon. This movie is iconic, and I think it's a fantastic watch. You've got to see it. Now, earlier I said Train to Busan was one of the most thought-provoking films on this list, but I realized very quickly as I was making this video that that is actually false, and I do apologize for that mistake. The Lighthouse is one of the best films I have seen in the last 15 years, and that is not hyperbole. That is also not counting horror. That is just in general. It is one of the best films I've seen in the last 15 years. The Lighthouse is an incredible achievement in both visual filmmaking, acting, directing by Robert Eggers. It is an incredible timepiece and an incredible time capsule of something that we genuinely don't think about a lot at all. I was debating at first whether or not to put it on this list, just because if I considered it a true horror movie, but the more I thought about it, I don't know that it gets much more horrific than being isolated with a person that you barely know and slowly lose your mind as you struggle just to do daily tasks and chores for your job. It's really a true Lovecraftian horror film that does an amazing job of showing a descent into madness, and also just doing a really great job of playing with urban mythologies and showing what it's like to go crazy. And I really, really love just all the subtle undertones that it has. I think the black and white choice was inspired. I think it's really, really great at everything it tries to do. I think it does it masterfully. The performances by Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe are incredible. They knock it out of the park. I think this is honestly a great way to end a video for the modern classics by talking about what is essentially one of the best movies and certainly deserves to be called a horror classic. And with that, that is my list for the most essential horror classics of the modern day. Tell me what you guys think. What do you consider to be a horror classic that maybe nobody talks about? Did I miss something that was really essential? Obviously, I know I left a lot of the big ones off, like It, Quiet Place, Descent, things like that, but I kind of wanted to keep it to more niche style movies that you may not have seen. So feel free to comment below. Let me know what you guys think. I would love to have a conversation with you in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, feel free to give it a thumbs down. Thank you so much for all the support for this channel lately. Once again, guys, thank you so much. Have a great day. Stay safe and happy Halloween.